Chapter 26. Ellex, Camber. The chief executive of the Lifewater megachurch was a tall and thin man. He wore round glasses and kept his hands clasped together as though holding his applause. The enemy held his distance, but was just close enough for Trig to notice he was TS. Ponnico threw one arm out to stop Anfel, Cantor, and Selborn from approaching too close. "Ellex Camber," Ponnico sneered. "What did the SLA promise you for an alliance with the Horde?" "Many things," Ellex replied. "But most crucially, the rebels have agreed to supply our forces with Sutherian military-grade weapons, which we will use to retake the necropolis. From there, a new Horde will rise. All I need is the 2 stones your little friends are keeping from me." Trig felt a nervous lurch in his stomach, followed by a rapidly building sense of doom. This time, he looked around quickly, trying to figure out what his premonition was warning him about. Tenna hunkered down behind him in the hangar, his eyes wide, as though she was trying to memorize every aspect of Ellex Camber's appearance. Ellex slowly raised his hand, palm out, to the mercenaries. "Stand aside," he said. "I have no wish to harm anyone. I only want what is rightfully mine." Selborn drew her blaster pistol and fired, shooting at Ellex until her magazine was empty. To Trig's horror, each round sailed through Ellex as though he was nothing but smoke in the wind. Unharmed, Ellex shook his head and gave a little smile. "Just like with Ponnico at the prison ship," Trig thought to himself. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," Anfel shouted. "So he's like you, Ponnico?" "No, not like me," Ponnico replied. "Ellex uses psionics, while I do the same with technology." "You resort to nanomachines because you've exhausted your powers," Ellex taunted. "You're weak, Ponnico." Then Ellex reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a long knife. It looked similar to the ceremonial dagger Trig once saw at a shrine of Kumase, specter of oblivion. "Now get out of my way, or I will make you." Ellex did not raise his voice, but the undercurrent of a deadly threat could not be missed. Selborn reloaded her gun. Anfel and Cantor reached for their own. Ponnico's body wavered, and for the shortest possible moment became translucent, before returning to its normal state. Ellex held his own hands together, fingertips touching. And then all hell broke loose. Anfel, Selborn, and Cantor attacked Ellex simultaneously. Moving as though he was made of liquid, Ellex lunged forward into the fight, ignoring the hail of gunfire as though it did not exist at all. Anfel took a wild swing, trying to strike Ellex with his pistol, but his hand and arm passed through Ellex's body without resistance. Anfel overbalanced and fell over, tripping up Selborn. Ellex kicked her in the leg, causing Selborn to hit the pavement face first. Then Ellex ran through a dumbfounded Cantor, got behind him, and grabbed his weapon arm. Cantor held down the trigger, spraying crimson-red bolts in all directions as he tried to fend off Ellex. Trig heard the snap of a round flying over his head and shouted, "Tenna, down!" He and Tenna both dropped to the floor. Tenna squished herself against Trig's body while he crawled into a position where he could see the fighting. Anfel, Selborn, and Cantor were all down. Ponnico and Ellex were standing face to face and seemed to be having a standoff, but there was something else going on. Trig realized that Ellex was subjecting Ponnico to a psionic attack. Intense heat emanated out of Ellex's body in waves, striking Ponnico. Each time a wave reached the old man, his body distorted and rippled like a pond disturbed by skipping stones. Ponnico seemed unable to move, but Ellex was also immobilized. Keeping his foe locked down was taking all of his effort. Ellex tilted his head to one side and shouted, "How are you, Tenna?" On his right, Trig felt Tenna shudder. "I hope you don't think I'm going to chase you," Ellex called out, trying to keep the strain out of his voice. Tenna did not move. The powerful heat waves emitting from Ellex intensified. Trig and Tenna sprang up from the hangar floor. It was suddenly hot to the touch, and both children began to sweat profusely. Ponnico's body was starting to shimmer like a mirage. "You can make it stop, Tenna!" Ellex raised his voice. "You have something that belongs to me." "What do I do?" Tenna gasped. "I can't think. I'm too scared." Trig, on the other hand, had an idea. "Listen to me. Do as I say, all right?" he whispered to Tenna. "Tenna Honora!" Ellex yelled. "I know you're there! Return the keystone to me this instant!" There was a pause, and then Tenna's voice came out of the hangar. "I'm coming out!" Tenna emerged, her hands held above her head. The necklace and keystone pendant were wrapped around her right palm. Tenna cautiously moved toward Ellex, her face pale. "There you are," Ellex spoke in a calmer tone, but still strained from the effort of holding Ponnico in place. "Now then, hand it to me." Tenna hesitated. "Were you really one of the Khan's chosen?" she said. Yes, I was." Ellex was losing patience with Tenna. "Then why'd you drop an asteroid on us? Why all the killing? I thought that wasn't Malum's way." Ellex took his eyes off Ponnico to look directly at Tenna. While Ellex spoke to her, Ponnico began to unfreeze. His limbs started to move, and his body wavered far less than it had a moment before. "You're stalling," Ellex said. "Why are you stalling?" He did not wait for an answer. Psionic energy radiated towards Tenna. Ellex was trying to infiltrate her mind, to read her thoughts. But by the time he found the answer, it was too late. This was the first time Trig and Tenna used their powers outside of training sessions with Ponnico. The children knew they could not take Ellex in a fair fight, so they decided they would use psionics to free the person who could. From the moment Tenna stepped out of the hangar, Trig had been projecting his own telepathic energy out of his own body and directly into Tenna's mind. He gave her focus and reinforced willpower. For these few moments, their minds were merged. Tenna was stronger and more powerful. As soon as she felt fully charged, Tenna reached up, pressed 2 fingers to the side of her head, and withdrew a glowing strand of purple light. Then she pointed those same 2 fingers at Ellex. A dim, barely visible beam of light shot out of Tenna's hand and connected with Ellex. The psionic attack was so weak, so underpowered, that it barely registered in his consciousness. But that was all Trig and Tenna needed to do. Ellex reacted. He broke off his focus on Ponnico completely, raising his hands to strike Tenna with some deadly psionic technique, but never got the chance. Once more, a nebulous black cloud erupted from Ponnico's body as he regained the initiative. "Go!" a voice yelled from somewhere inside the cloud. Trig started to run for the resonance cascade, but then he noticed Tenna was lagging behind. She was watching the fight between Ponnico and Ellex, looking torn. Cantor, Anfel, and Selborn were back on their feet, having been freed from whatever hold Ellex had on them. Trig grabbed Tenna by the wrist and pulled her into the hangar and up the boarding ramp. "Behind you!" Cantor yelled. 1, 2, 3 mercenaries hastily reboarded the ship. Trig and Tenna did not try to don their spacesuits. They had no time. Instead, Rulon and Kara grabbed the children and stuffed them into the nearest crash couch. "Wait!" a voice yelled. "I'm down here!" Cantor swore loudly. "Get inside and lay on the floor! We're about to go!" A deep, booming sound echoed through the ship. Trig looked around to see what looked like millions of black particles cascading through a doorway and into the chamber where he and Tenna were seated. After a second, this heap of fine powder began to move of its own accord, shuffling and twisting and changing color until... "Holy Ariha! It's Ponnico!" Tenna shouted. As soon as his body reassembled itself and he looked like an old man again, Ponnico shouted as loudly as he could, "Close the hatches and punch it!" Up in the cockpit, Bronley activated the launch computer. "Starting launch sequence," said a computerized voice. "Please wait for hangar doors to open fully." Through the cockpit view screen, Bronley could see the vertical launch doors of the spaceport hangar slowly starting to pull apart, revealing the smoky skies above. The doors were moving too slowly for his liking. "Well, fuck this!" Bronley yelled, and then he throttled the engines up to full power. The resonance cascade smashed through the doors and shot into the sky. Battered but still alive, Ellex watched the warship flee the scene. He shook his head and started to walk away. The race for the 6 keystones had begun.